I never thought that accepting a simple dinner invitation would end with my humiliation in front of the whole family. "Oh, good, you made it. We weren't sure you could afford an Uber." That was the first thing Sierra said when I stepped into their condo. No hug, no hello, just that. She was wearing white, of course, like she always did when she wanted to feel untouchable. One hand perched on her hip, the other dangling a bent wire hanger like she expected me to hang coats. My coat. It was 6:12 p.m. on a Saturday, and the sun outside was peach orange, setting low over Charlotte's skyline. I stood in their Tryon Towers high-rise, 32 floors above my own quiet West End life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ice in my veins. The kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. The kind that slides in through your ribs when someone cuts you down in front of others. I took the hanger from her without a word. Played along. That's what you do when you've been the good mother-in-law. When you've swallowed pride and cooked extra and lent money you couldn't afford to give. When you've smiled through teeth grinding in the back of your jaw. They had a jazz playlist going. Nothing too upbeat. And the smell of roasted fennel and buttered salmon snuck in from the kitchen. Their view stretched east over the city, glass and steel catching the last of the light. Expensive, curated, sterile. No children's drawings on the fridge. No smudged light switches. Not a pillow out of place. A group text pinged my phone in my purse. I checked it in the hallway. Discreet. It was from Sierra. Sent 5 minutes earlier. "Don't worry, she won't eat much." I stared at it a moment. Malcolm had reacted to it with a laughing emoji. I still had the paper Uber receipt in my coat pocket. $9.23. Paid in cash? My choice. They didn't need to know about the balance sitting quietly in my account. I kept my smile in place as I walked past the hall mirror, where my reflection looked calm. Neutral even. But I felt the old heat behind my ears. The one I used to get before parent-teacher conferences when Calvin was alive and we worried over Malcolm's grades. That heat had always been about protection, about care. Tonight, it was something else entirely. The jazz kept playing as I walked further in, but my mind slipped back to that morning, 9 a.m. sharp, when I stood barefoot in my kitchen, robe cinched tight, stirring honey into my tea. I'd just swept the porch. The scent of lemon oil lingered on the wood floors. Outside, dew clung to my azaleas. That's where I truly lived. Not in a condo with fingerprintless glass and silent appliances. In my modest brick ranch off Rozelle's Ferry Road, where everything smelled like lived-in time. Malcolm liked to imagine I was barely scraping by since Calvin passed. He didn't know about the quiet arrangements I'd made, and I never corrected him. Let them think what they want. People like Sierra mistake silence for lack. I'd opened my banking app after breakfast, same as I did every Saturday. The deposit had hit overnight. $40,112.52. Clean, legitimate, and earned. It showed under Rucker and Graves' tax prep, client settlement, sitting in the business account I opened 2 years after Calvin's funeral. Account ending in 7,718. That account was my tether to a new kind of survival. Denise Rucker, my CPA, had helped me set up everything after Calvin's insurance finally cleared. Her office smelled like old receipts and new beginnings. Even Malcolm didn't know about Denise. He thought I still lived off my monthly Social Security. I let him believe it. If he had ever looked deeper, he'd have found out I owned the duplex down the block, the one he thought belonged to some retired army man. Rented out, managed properly, steady income. But it was easier to let my own son think I was just a relic with a fixed income and no ambition left in my bones. He didn't ask, and I stopped offering. Calvin used to say I was a blueprint woman, steady, quiet, precise. "You build things that last, Bernadine," he told me once, leaning against the kitchen counter after a double shift at the plant. "Even when nobody thanks you." I'd nodded and poured him more coffee. That blueprint held firm, even after the concrete cracked. In the Tryon Towers condo, Sierra handed me a champagne flute without asking if I drank. I took it, didn't sip. Just let the glass catch the light as I studied their curated furniture. Malcolm sat on a leather stool by the kitchen island, checking his phone, not once looking up to meet my eyes. That used to hurt. Now it just clarified. He didn't see me. Not really. But I saw everything. The dining room in their condo gleamed like a hotel lobby. White walls, brushed steel light fixtures, a centerpiece that looked like it had never been touched. As Sierra floated between guests with a refill in one hand and a joke in the other, I let my mind drift back to Friday morning, to my own quiet ritual. That day started the way most of them had since Calvin passed, sweeping the porch while the sun was still soft, the air not yet broken by car horns or leaf blowers. The broom moved in easy strokes. That porch had held birthday balloons, condolence casseroles, and once Malcolm's high school football trophy for 2 weeks before he remembered it. Inside, I made sweet tea the way my mother taught me. 2 family-size bags steeped strong, sugar stirred in while the liquid was still hot. I set the pitcher in the fridge and opened my stock app. Nothing dramatic. Just checking, tracking, watching. The E-Trade quarterly report had come in the day before. My investments had ticked up again. The number blinked across the screen. $3.1 million. I didn't gasp or gloat, just exhaled. Nobody knew, not even Miss Reba, my neighbor and retired postal worker, who brought me leftover peach cobbler every other Sunday. But if anyone deserved to know, it was her. She'd been the one to ride with me to the probate office when Calvin's paperwork dragged on for 6 months. She was the one who said, "Don't let sorrow make you soft, Bernadine." That Friday, I'd waved at her from my walkway as she clipped her hedges in a wide straw hat. No makeup, no fuss, just 2 widows in sync with the rhythm of their own lives. She didn't ask questions, just gave me a nod that said she knew I was still holding the line. Malcolm and Sierra only called when something needed fixing or funding. Rent, car trouble, that broken AC unit in the heat of July. The silence between their requests always stretched long, then snapped back into urgency when money ran low. I'd see Malcolm's name pop up and already know the figure before he spoke it. 100 here, 750 there. No preamble, no check-in, just, "Mama, can you?" And still, I answered. Back then. But that Friday, before the dinner invitation had even arrived, I'd already sensed something shifting. Not in them. In me. I had started pulling the ledger. It was under the pecan tree that I let the full weight of memory press against me. The kind of memory that tastes like copper and shame. 1 year ago, almost to the day, Malcolm had come by the house in a rush. He didn't sit, didn't ask for tea, just stood, shifting from foot to foot like a teenager caught out past curfew. Said he needed a bridge, just a little something to get past the hump. His tone was light, but his eyes darted. "Just a few weeks, Mama," he said. "I'll have it right back to you by October. Maybe sooner." He grinned like it was a joke we were in on together. I knew what he was asking before he even said the number. $12,000. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just asked, "You still at the credit union?" He nodded, and I pulled out my phone. 4 Zelle transfers, $3,000 each over 10 days. I wrote loan in the memo line every time, as if that word had the power to make it so. I stood there that afternoon with the bark of the pecan tree rough against my shoulder, watching him drive off in the very car he claimed he might lose. Calvin would have asked for documents. He'd have called Ms. Shonda at the NC Teachers Credit Union and talked it through before letting that much money go out the house. But me? I wanted to believe my son. I wanted to believe that if I gave, he'd remember who I was, what I'd done, that he'd finally see me as more than an emergency fund and address. Miss Shonda had helped me dispute a fraudulent withdrawal once, back when Malcolm was in his 20s, and thought my debit card was an extension of his own wallet. She didn't ask questions then. She just flagged the account and got my money back. I'd never told her the full truth, never admitted who had taken it. But I thought about her now as I sat under that tree, looking through my email inbox and finding the receipts. They weren't buried. I hadn't hidden them. I just hadn't wanted to see them stacked together. 12,000 gone. Not even a thank you card. Not even a payment plan scratched out on the back of a napkin. Just silence. And then, another ask. I sat at my dining table the day before the dinner, calculator in one hand and a red pen in the other, the kind you use when you're done pretending. The folder was thick, labeled Malcolm and Sierra Support in my slanted cursive. I had started it 3 years ago, back when Sierra still called me Mama, with a sweetness that almost sounded real. It held receipts, bank slips, copies of checks, and notes scribbled in the margins of bill envelopes. I hadn't meant to keep score. But When you've been bled slowly, you start to chart the drops. $1,800 for the sofa set they picked out at the showroom on South Boulevard. I remember Sierra twirling in the store like it was her prom night, dragging Malcolm from sectional to sectional. "This one screams family," she said, and smiled at me like we were in on the future together. I co-signed, paid half, and when the first payment got missed, I covered it entirely. $12,000 from the bridge loan under the pecan tree, never returned. $7,500 for the down payment on their first apartment. "You're investing in our start," Malcolm had said, kissing my forehead. The check cleared the next morning. So did his calls for a while. $3,200 for utility bills that somehow always got delayed because Sierra's job had changed or Malcolm's hours were cut. $2,100 in furniture upgrades, bar stools, rugs, a mirrored headboard that Sierra insisted would elevate the energy of the space. $800 for her dental emergency that became urgent the day before her bridal photo shoot. The wedding itself, well, that ledger was heavier. $15,136 in total. Venue deposit, florist, cake tasting. A custom veil from a boutique in Charleston that Sierra claimed was one of a kind. I paid the vendors directly. I still have the receipts. And I remember too well the way she cried when I handed over the envelope with the final payment, hugging me like a daughter. "Mama, you saved us," she whispered. I believed her. By the time I was done, the calculator read $48,736. 3 years. Nearly $50,000. Not a trust fund. Not a gift. Just a mother's leaking heart. I emailed Denise the totals that night. She responded in less than 10 minutes. "Got it. Fully documented and categorized. We'll keep copies in triplicate." That folder sat in the center of my table now, like a monument. Not to generosity, to clarity. By 6:45 p.m., dinner was served, and the long, lacquered table shimmered with dishes plated too carefully to be eaten with appetite. They'd hired a private chef. Sierra made sure to announce that twice, and each course arrived like a museum exhibit. Saffron risotto, cedar plank salmon, asparagus spears curled like question marks. But all I could taste was the faint metallic buzz of anticipation. The room was staged for admiration. Dim sconces, heavy silverware, wine poured into stemware I wouldn't trust near my own countertop. Sierra sat at the head of the table, back straight, voice bright, controlling the rhythm like a conductor. Malcolm sat to her right, silent, eyes bouncing between his phone and his plate. There were 6 of us total. Sierra's parents, Dr. and Mrs. Maynard, were visiting from Asheville. Perfect teeth, expensive perfume, polite tyranny. It was Dr. Maynard who said it. "So, Bernadine?" he drawled, swirling his wine like it whispered to him. "Got any plans for Shady Pines yet?" The joke was followed by a chuckle, light and airy, but it landed like a slap. "You know, retirement communities. My mother moved last year, says she loves not having to worry about the stove anymore." The table laughed, reflexive and soft. Even Sierra gave a tight smile, lifting her champagne. I looked directly at Malcolm. He flinched. The silence that followed was thin, like stretched plastic wrap. Malcolm cleared his throat. "Dad jokes," he muttered, changing the subject to the wine. No one circled back, but I did. Not aloud, not yet. I tapped my phone gently under the table, opened the voice memo app, and pressed record. Just a habit now. I'd learned to keep track, not just of dollars, but of tone, of timing, of how people say things they think won't be remembered. As I looked across the table, I caught Sierra's wrist glinting in the candlelight. A Cartier bracelet. New. I knew the style. I knew the price. $6,700 at retail. I'd seen it once when we passed through South Park Mall. Someday, she'd said wistfully. Apparently, someday had arrived. The waiter, his name was Andre, I'd asked, caught my eye as he cleared my untouched plate. He gave a small nod, not sympathy exactly, just awareness. I rose quietly after dessert was announced, excused myself with a smile. By 7:20 p.m., the dinner plates had been cleared and replaced with tiny glass bowls of panna cotta, dressed in gold flakes and raspberry coulis. I didn't touch mine. My appetite had already been replaced by something far less digestible. We'd moved to the dessert bar, A long white counter flanked by velvet stools, every inch curated for aesthetic effect. Sierra perched at the edge like a hostess in her own show, crossing her legs so the heel of her shoe grazed the marble base with intention. Malcolm leaned next to her, unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that hums beneath bad weather. It was Sierra's mother who steered the next ambush. "Bernadine," she said too smoothly, "you know, it's wise to get ahead of these things. My mother deeded her house to me 5 years before she got sick. That way, when things started slipping, it was all taken care of." She sipped her espresso like she hadn't just suggested I surrender my autonomy. Sierra nodded solemnly, as if the thought pained her. "We've been reading up on it. So many families wait too long, and then it gets messy. We just want to make sure you're protected, Mama, while you're still clear-headed." She said it like a compliment, like she was praising a sunset she expected to fade soon. I turned slowly to Malcolm, expecting disbelief. Instead, he was staring hard at the floor, jaw clenched, fingers twitching against the stem of his glass. Then, "God help me," he nodded. A single complicit nod. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I looked down the bar where a tablet sat, screen still glowing from whatever slideshow Sierra had last tapped through. With one swipe, it opened to a browser window already pulled up. Mecklenburg County Deed Transfer Form. My address had been typed in the parcel search. My name was spelled wrong. I exhaled slowly. "That's interesting," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I didn't know we were having that kind of conversation tonight." Sierra's father chuckled. "Just a precaution, of course," I smiled tightly. "Of course." But inside, something hardened. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Something steel. I finished my water, folded my napkin carefully, and placed it atop the untouched panna cotta. "Excuse me," I said, already rising. No one stopped me. I needed air. And distance. And a plan. By 7:45 p.m., the edge of civility had thinned to a translucent thread. I returned from the restroom to find Sierra in the guest seating area, seated just so on a low-cream chaise, her tablet open on her lap like a portfolio presentation. Malcolm sat beside her, fingers laced, expression taut. The room smelled faintly of rosewater and lemon polish, and through the sheer curtains, the last of the sun flickered off the high-rises. "Come sit, Mama," Sierra said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "We want to show you something exciting." The word exciting landed crooked. She tapped the screen, and a Pinterest-style mood board filled with sage greens and creams appeared. "We've been thinking about how to make your guest room more functional. Turn it into a nursery. Just an idea." She smiled, glossy and bright. "Something soft, cozy, minimalist." My stomach turned. Malcolm reached behind him and handed me a manila folder. Inside, a printed Zillow listing. My own home, front and center. My name, misspelled, sat under the owner review section, scribbled in red ink, pending offer. I looked at the price. Under market. Way under. The kind of price you name when you're certain the seller won't argue. Because you think the seller doesn't know any better. Because you think you already own them. Sierra crossed her legs and leaned forward slightly, her voice syrup smooth. "It's a smart time to list. The market's still hot, and that neighborhood's about to get rezoned. You'd come out ahead." "And where?" I asked, setting the folder down without breaking eye contact. "Did you imagine I'd go?" Malcolm cleared his throat. "We figured you'd want to be closer to us. Maybe something smaller? Newer? Less maintenance? We could help with the logistics." I looked between them. Two adults planning my future like I was already in some waiting room for the Gond. Sierra reached out and touched my knee lightly. "Mama, we're just trying to think ahead." "It's all love." I gave her a long look. "No, baby, it's all calculation." That broke the spell. Just a flicker. Malcolm's jaw tightened, and Sierra's hand slipped away from my leg. She adjusted the tablet screen and sat back, her tone cooler now. "We're just trying to include you. Include me in my own erasure." I rose, steady. "I think I've seen enough for tonight." Neither of them followed me to the door. By 8:20 p.m., I stood in the elevator lobby, jacket folded neatly over my arm, purse clutched with both hands. Not out of nerves, but containment. If I didn't grip something, I wasn't sure what might rise to the surface. The hallway air was colder than the rest of the condo, and I was grateful for it. Cooling. clarifying. The dinner, the mood board, the smirks and gentle condescension. All of it now arranged in my memory like a courtroom exhibit. Ordered, labeled, lying in wait. Sierra didn't walk me out. Of course not. She had other guests to charm, other glasses to refill. It was Malcolm who trailed behind, finally catching up as the elevator chimed and the doors slid open. "Mama," he said, hand in his pocket, shoulders low. "They're just trying to help. You know how Sierra is. She plans. She doesn't mean anything by it." I stepped into the elevator and turned. "Help?" I repeated. He nodded, forced a laugh. "Yeah. I mean, nobody's trying to push you into anything. We're just thinking long term." "Whose term?" I asked. He looked down, then back up. "Come on. You've always been practical. This is no different." The elevator doors began to close, but I reached out and held them with one hand. "You really think I'm some confused old woman sitting on an empty house and a head full of dust, don't you?" He winced. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." His voice softened. "Look, we're just worried about you, that's all." I nodded once, slow and deliberate, then let the doors close between us. Inside the elevator, I leaned against the mirrored wall. My own reflection stared back at me, steadier than it had any right to be. There was no heartbreak. Not anymore. What I felt was older than sadness. It was steel laced through bone, a rising clarity that hummed just beneath the skin. In my purse was an envelope with $40 in cash, emergency money I always carried, just enough to remind myself I didn't need to ask anyone for a ride. Not then, not now, not ever. I'd played tired on my way out. Hugged Sierra coolly, declined dessert, thanked everyone for dinner. Played the role they expected. That was the last time I would do so. By the time the Uber pulled up outside Tryon Towers, the wind had picked up and the street was mostly empty. I got in without a word. Midnight found me at my desk. Glass of wine half full. File folders spread like a crime scene across the old pine surface. Calvin refinished the year before he passed. The lamp cast a warm pool of light, softening the hard edges of every document, but it couldn't dim the sharpness in my chest. I hadn't taken off my earrings or shoes. I hadn't touched the wine, except to lift it once and put it down again. Instead, I sat perfectly still, staring at the blinking cursor on the email I'd been drafting for over an hour. Subject line, "Let's lock this down." The kitchen clock ticked behind me, even and unbothered. Malcolm's text had come in just after I walked through the front door. "Think about what we said. We just want the best for you." The sentence read like a press release, measured, empty, already wiped clean of its intent. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the folder marked House, a stack I hadn't touched in months. Deed, mortgage statements, paid-off balance, property tax history, insurance certificates. Everything in order. Everything current. Everything mine. Then I clicked open my message thread with Denise Rucker. We hadn't spoken since tax season, but I trusted her the way some people trust prayer. She was the only one who had seen the full picture. My accounts, my holdings, the layered choices I'd made to shield myself quietly, methodically, in case someone ever got greedy. I typed, "Denise, effective immediately. Freeze all access and revoke POA. Lock down the house trust. Transfer admin control to me only. Schedule meeting. No third-party authorizations unless signed and notarized in person. Confirm when secure." My finger hovered over the send button for 3 beats. Then, click. The reply came within 10 minutes. Understood. Confirming now. You're making the right move. Something settled in my bones. Not peace, not quite, but grounding. Like standing barefoot on a hardwood floor and feeling its temperature shift under you. I leaned back in my chair, finally kicking off my shoes. The wine, untouched for hours, had gone warm. I carried it to the sink and poured it down the drain. The night outside was velvet black, the porch light throwing soft halos across the bushes Calvin once trimmed every Saturday morning. I turned off the lamp, locked the front door, and paused with my hand on the knob. This house still smelled like me. It always would. Monday at 10:30 a.m., I walked into First Landmark Bank on West Boulevard dressed like I meant business. A navy pantsuit, low heels, No jewelry except my wedding band. Not mourning, not begging, just clear. Mr. Lionel Craig greeted me from his office, rising when he saw me, his expression folding into something between surprise and concern. "Ms. Bernadine," he said, motioning me in. "Everything all right?" "It will be," I answered, setting my handbag on the leather chair beside his desk. "I need to cancel all joint cards, freeze any linked accounts, and end every automatic transfer associated with Malcolm or Sierra Johnson." He blinked, then reached for a notepad. "All of them?" "Every last one." Lionel had known me for years, processed the cashier's checks I'd used to cover Malcolm's wedding balance, notarized the power of attorney I now slid across the table in silence. "Revoke this," I said. "Effective immediately." He studied the document, then looked at me. "Understood." As he began the process, I pulled out my phone. That's when it buzzed. Fraud alert. $4,200 transaction declined. Card ending in 8,810. Sierra, most likely. Right on time. I turned the screen so Lionel could see. "They already tried." He gave a low whistle. "That card's been deactivated now. We'll issue new ones in your name only. Two-step authentication on all accounts. Want me to flag any unusual incoming access attempts?" "Yes. And alert me if they so much as check a balance." He nodded, typing with swift precision. This wasn't new to him. Protecting people who waited too long to draw the line. "You know," he said after a moment, "not many folks your age make moves like this before it's too late." I gave a short smile. "That's because they wait to be hurt before they act. I've already been." He didn't ask more. Just handed me the new paperwork. Fresh cardholder agreements, account restriction confirmations, updated beneficiary forms. I signed every page without hesitation. My hand didn't even shake. When I stepped out into the parking lot, the air felt lighter. The sky, a bright, indifferent blue. The kind of blue that doesn't ask permission. My phone buzzed again. Malcolm this time. I silenced it. Let them call. Let them wonder. The door they'd been holding open with guilt and entitlement had just slammed shut, and I'd locked it from the inside. That evening, back home, I spread the receipts across my kitchen table like puzzle pieces I already knew how to fit. I didn't need to squint at them anymore. I'd memorized the numbers, the dates, the silent pattern of erosion. The scanner buzzed softly, methodically humming as each document slid through. Bank statements, canceled checks, loan memos, payment screenshots. One after the other, lined up in date order. The red folder labeled Malcolm and Sierra Support had now become digital armor. I saved everything twice, one copy on an external drive, the other encrypted through Secure Cloud Pro. Password, Bernadine 7718. Denise had taught me that after a client's niece drained a retirement fund in less than 3 months. "Don't ever keep all your proof on paper," she warned. "Paper gets misplaced, intentional-like." The kitchen clock ticked on. Outside, the cicadas buzzed in the bushes. I worked by the overhead light. The ceiling fan spinning slow like time itself was reconsidering its pace. The final PDF finished uploading at 10:12 p.m. Folder title, CYA. Sierra's email came in at 10:14. No greeting. Just a subject line, bank issues, then one line in the body. Did something go wrong with your account? Our rent payment got declined. She added a frowning emoji, the kind you'd send for a late pizza order, not for betrayal. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the spreadsheet Denise had helped me compile, each row marked with a date, recipient, method of transfer, and purpose. Totals tallied at the bottom, highlighted in bold red. $48,736, not including interest, not including dignity. I uploaded it into the same cloud folder. Then I did something I hadn't done in a year. I printed a copy. Not to share, just to hold. Just to remember I hadn't imagined it. That my generosity hadn't been a figment or exaggeration. It had names, figures, timestamps. Malcolm and Sierra had always banked on me forgetting. On my silence. On shame doing their work for them. But shame, it turns out, is excellent fuel when used right. By 11 o'clock, I'd closed every folder, sealed every envelope, and returned the external drive to the fireproof safe in the hall closet. I changed the passcode on the house alarm, too, just because I could. I turned out the lights in the kitchen last. The scanner's final hum still echoed faintly in the room. Tuesday morning, crisp and cloudless, I walked into the church office at Mount Zion Baptist wearing a navy cardigan and my Sunday flats. Pastor Morris Clay looked up from his desk, eyes widening as he rose with both hands outstretched. "Bernadine?" he said, the warmth in his voice settling the room. "It's been too long. Too long by far," I replied, and sat down in the chair across from him, setting my folder, now labeled Estate Access Revoked, on the table between us. He didn't ask right away. Pastor Clay had the good sense to wait. "I need to loop you in," I said after a beat, voice even. "It's about Malcolm and Sierra. I've had to take some steps." His expression shifted. Not surprise, but recognition, as if he'd seen the same unraveling happen before. I opened the folder, slid over a copy of the notarized power of attorney revocation, the trust amendment Denise had prepared, and the estate summary. No fanfare, just facts. He reviewed them carefully, nodding. "Is there danger?" "Not the kind that bleeds," I said, "but the kind that rots." 10 minutes later, Denise joined us on speakerphone from her office. Her voice, brisk and sharp, cut through the church's gentle stillness. "Everything's been transferred to secure accounts. New will, new trust. Only authorized signatories are Bernadine and myself. No one else has access to a single dollar." Pastor Clay nodded along. "Good. And witnesses?" "They'll be there," I said. By 10:45 a.m., we had a witness log started and initialed. Lionel Craig from the bank, Denise's digital confirmation, and Pastor Clay himself. The church's administrative assistant, a steely woman named Pearl, who once audited the choir budget down to the penny, added her initials too. Malcolm had left me a 2-minute voicemail the night before, voice thick with emotion, cracking on phrases like, "I just want to talk," and "We didn't mean to upset you." I didn't play it for them, but I transcribed it, included it in the log. The wall clock ticked as I signed the last page of the affidavit. "Anything else?" Pastor Clay asked gently. "Yes," I said, standing. "If they show up here, at church, at Bible study, wherever, ask them to leave. Do not mediate. Just stand firm." He nodded once, slowly. "It'll be handled." I left with my head high, folders zipped shut. Wednesday, just before noon, I sat in Denise's office, watching her fingers move over her keyboard with the precision of a surgeon. The windows were open slightly, letting in the faint hum of traffic from Beatty's Ford Road. The room smelled like lemon toner and ink. "We've finalized everything," she said, adjusting her glasses. "The new trust is filed. Inheritance is conditional, documented, and enforceable. If they meet the terms, they get access. If not, they get nothing." I nodded. "Good. Print me 2 hard copies. One for the safe, one for the binder." Denise leaned back and studied me. "You know, most people don't act until the damage is too far gone." I met her gaze evenly. "I've lived long enough to know that silence costs more than action." She passed me the documents, precisely labeled, each with a blue tab for signature. Ezra reviewed everything. "You're protected." Ezra Morgan, my new estate attorney, had been calm and exacting through every revision. He never once questioned my clarity, never once asked if I wanted to reconsider. He simply ensured my decisions had teeth. As I flipped through the papers, my phone buzzed on silent. A notification from Facebook lit the screen. I tapped it open out of habit, and there it was. A public post from Sierra. "Family can be cruel. Sometimes the people who raised you forget how to love." 3 crying emojis, dozens of comments. I read every single one, sending prayers. "You're so strong. She'll come around." No one asked for context. No one wondered what cruelty looked like, with numbers and documents attached. Performative grief was her language, and the audience was always ready. I turned the screen toward Denise. She arched one brow and took a screenshot. "Add it to the binder," I said. She chuckled. "Already did." When we finished signing, I handed her a cashier's check for her services, freshly printed that morning. $3,800. Paid in full. This was worth every cent, I told her, sliding my copy of the new estate trust into my briefcase. Outside, the October air had shifted cool, and I paused on the sidewalk before heading to my car. I watched a couple walk past with a stroller, young, distracted, not yet aware of how fast things could turn. Sierra wanted a future she hadn't earned. Malcolm played along. They thought I wouldn't draw lines, but the ink was dry now, and the terms were final. That evening, just after Bible study wrapped, I heard the shuffle of heels and dress shoes echoing off the fellowship hall's linoleum floors. I knew before I turned around that it was them. Sierra had a habit of announcing herself with silence, the kind stretched tight enough to snap. "Hi, Mama," she said softly, arms already outstretched like we were part of some sentimental movie scene. Her eyes were red, but not from crying, from practice. I didn't move. She hesitated, then smiled wider. "We just wanted to stop by, clear the air." Malcolm stood beside her, hands stuffed in his pockets, jaw tense. He looked like he hadn't slept. Good. Behind me, Sister Tilda stacked chairs against the wall. Brother Ellis filled the donation basket. 14 witnesses, give or take. That wasn't an accident. "I don't do drop-ins," I said, my voice steady, not raised. "You want something, you schedule." Malcolm stepped forward. "Mama, we're not trying to fight. Can't we just talk?" Sierra tilted her head. "Please, this is getting out of hand. We're family." I reached into my purse and pulled out a crisp document, handed it to Pastor Clay, who'd stepped quietly into the circle forming near the coffee urns. "Power of attorney revocation," I said. "On file, witnessed, notarized, legally binding. If they ask about access again, refer them to Denise or Ezra." Sierra's smile cracked. Pastor Clay didn't flinch. He held the paper like scripture and folded it neatly. "Understood." "Bernadine," Malcolm started. "No," I said, sharper now. "You don't get to speak first anymore. You made your choice when you stood by and let your wife plan my replacement while I was still breathing." The room hushed. Chairs paused mid-stack. Even the air held still. "You don't mean that," Sierra said, eyes wide. "I mean every syllable," I replied. Malcolm's voice broke. "You're not being fair." "Fair?" I turned toward him. "Fair is not erasing the hand that fed you. Fair is not planning a nursery in someone else's home without their consent." Pastor Clay stepped in, firm. "I think it's best if y'all leave." Sierra blinked fast. "This is a misunderstanding." "No, baby," I said, my voice softer now. "It's an unveiling." Saturday at 2 p.m. sharp, I stood at the front of the Beatty's Ford Library community room in a cobalt blue blazer, my notes arranged in precise stacks beside a projector screen. Rows of chairs filled with seniors, mostly women, mostly quiet, watched me with curious eyes. Some clutched tote bags, others scribbled in notebooks already half full. The flyer had read, "Protecting Yourself from Family Predators, a Financial Literacy Talk." I didn't dress the part of a victim. I came as evidence. Behind me, the first slide glowed onto the screen. "Trust is not a strategy." I let it hang there a moment. Then I spoke. "We are raised to give, to sacrifice. To believe love means saying yes, even when our pockets say otherwise. But love," I paused, "should never require blind surrender." Heads nodded, pens scratched. I walked them through the basics: title protections, POA pitfalls, red flags disguised as help. I told them about deed transfers disguised as precaution and the danger of linking bank accounts just for emergencies. And then I said, "Let me show you what this looks like up close." From my tote, I pulled the binder Denise had helped me assemble. Tabs marked transfers, support, loans, revocations, witness logs. Every figure, every date, printed in 14-point font. No excuses for small print. No room for denial. That's when they walked in. Malcolm and Sierra, 10 minutes late, stepping into the back row like they were strolling through a park. Sierra wore a neutral-toned pantsuit and a smile meant for cameras. Malcolm, thinner than I remembered, kept his eyes down. I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, I flipped to the next slide. A breakdown of financial support over 3 years, $48,736, with dates, vendors, memo lines. I read each line aloud, slow and clear, no emotion, just numbers. A collective shift rippled through the room, shoulders stiffened, mouths pressed flat. Every dollar documented. Every choice made in love, until it wasn't love anymore, but expectation. A woman in the second row muttered, "Lord have mercy," I continued. "Your legacy should not be a reward for manipulation. Protect yourselves." At 2:45 p.m., I opened the binder to the final section. Exhibit A, Mama's Support. I had printed 25 copies. I passed them down the rows like communion. Each stapled packet bore a cover page. Documented financial contributions, Bernadine Johnson to Malcolm and Sierra Johnson, 2020 to 2023. Underneath, my full name, my full authority. "Please follow along," I said, voice calm as water before a storm. Page 1, 4 Zelle transfers totaling $12,000. Each line read aloud, complete with memo field. Car note bridge, holding you over, loan, return by October, and emergency funds. Each one dated, none repaid. Page 2, wedding expenses, checks cut directly to vendors. I read them slow. $1,200 to Grace Catering, $4,500 to the Vine Venue, $2,000 to Charleston Veils and Lace. My signature in ink on each line. The audience leaned forward. Page 3, utilities, furniture, deposits. A full ledger, subtotals listed in red. Malcolm sat motionless in the back row, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. Sierra was whispering now, something fast, low, clipped, but I didn't look at her. "This," I said, holding up the binder, "is not bitterness. It's documentation." A man in the third row raised his hand. "Did they ever pay anything back?" I didn't blink. "Not a cent." Murmurs rippled. Behind me, the projector displayed the updated estate trust summary. Inheritance now conditional. All access revoked. Signatory authority limited to 2 names, Bernadine Johnson and Denise Rucker. A woman near the front raised her hand. "And they didn't know about any of this?" "Oh, they knew they were taking. They just didn't expect I'd keep the receipts." I clicked the remote. Final slide. Legacy must be protected with boundaries, not guilt. Ezra Morgan, seated quietly near the refreshments table, stood and addressed the room. "All documents presented today have been reviewed and verified by our office. If anyone here needs assistance setting up protections like these, Legal Aid Charlotte will be available after the session." The room applauded. Sierra stood suddenly, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. The door slammed behind her, the sound sharp as a gavel. Malcolm stayed seated. I closed the binder, placed it gently on the table. "Thank you for your time," I said. "And remember, love without accountability is just debt by another name." I walked off the stage without looking back. Sunday morning at 8:30, I sat on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee and the scent of gardenia rising from the bushes Calvin planted years ago. The air was crisp, touched with the first hints of fall, the kind of morning that asked nothing from you but presence. The locks had been changed the night before, deadbolts, doorknobs, even the old side gate latch. Mr. Tillman, the handyman Miss Reba swore by, installed them all by dusk. New keys jingled in my pocket, clean brass. No copies distributed. On the table beside me sat a small stack, 2 manila envelopes, sealed and addressed. Inside each, a wedding gift, 1 engraved frame and a check for $500. I'd written them last year, before the ceremony, never mailed them. 1 envelope had a sticky note, "Return to sender." I placed them both into a shipping box, added a printed note that read simply, "Unopened, unused, unwelcome." Then I taped it shut, set it by the front door for pickup, and poured another cup. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I watched it buzz 3 times before blocking it. A minute later, another call came through. Different number. Blocked again. This pattern repeated 4 more times. Desperation is persistent, but so was I. The porch was quiet again. Only the birds and the soft clink of my spoon against ceramic. Inside, on the dining table, sat my final will. Denise had sent over the hard copy with a note clipped to the front. "You did the right thing." The terms were explicit. No inheritance unless criteria were met. Employment, sobriety, documented responsibility, reviewable every 2 years, revocable without notice, The church had a copy. Ezra had the legal filings. Denise had everything else. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out and left something sturdier in its place. Peace. I watched the sunlight stretch across the porch floor. A neighbor's dog barked once. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started. Life, as it always does, continued without fanfare. I sipped my coffee, the rim warm against my lip, and felt it fully. The freedom of no longer needing to be the bridge and the burden. The house, the funds, the future, they were mine again. Not to guard, not to explain, to live in. I reached into my robe pocket, fingers closing around the new keys. Cool. Solid. Final.